It's information item 12.
Concession
Water
for
Department General Matters, an update on equitable distribution program, page 75. Turn on your microphone.
Page 75 of the agenda. And Jesse Silva is presenting today.
Good afternoon. On our water use, we got up to as high as about 28,000 projection of being over our allotment, and it's been trending down to the point where we're about 16,000, just under 16,000 acre feet over as a projection from the Bureau. So with any luck, we'll continue to go down and get closer to the goal. We have a lot of alfalfa seed, as you all notice this here, so there'll be a little break in there from irrigation, so we'll see what that does. We're also keeping track. If you remember here 3 months or so ago, the advisory board asked us to do as much as we could to minimize water usage and spills. We're keeping track of the spills. We have definitely seen a reduction in spills compared to last year, and we're preparing these in formats that we can give to you, by the way. Also, in the divisions, we're keeping track of water that is turned back in the afternoon, and we're trying to find other water users that'll take it, and so we've got a format for that report. We'll be getting you that information as well. As you mentioned, we do have Ben Brock here that's going to give us a presentation on an update on the Equitable Distribution Program. Ben?
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. Since the May 14th passing of the revised Equitable Distribution Plan, I want to cover 3 topics. One, the outreach activities we've taken, the water user response, and an update on the agricultural water clearinghouse. Back in May and June, in mid-May, water account summary packets were sent out to all the owners and tenants. These packages had a water account summary listing the fields under the water account, the IID map number for each field, net farmable acres for each field, and the calculation of 3.7 acre feet times the net farmable acres, yielding the apportionment for each field. The packages also had a copy of the forms, a set of instructions for filling out the forms, an informational letter, and a postage paid return envelope. Also, in late May and June, IID staff spoke at Farm Bureau TMDL meetings, approximately 9 meetings. And IID staff also held one-on-one workshops at division offices, both in the north, the south end, as well as at the Farm Bureau and the veg growers. And we also had further notification by means of an insert in the water bills. So far, the water user response has been, we've had approximately 1,100 out of 5,400 forms for apportionment acceptance returned as of yesterday, 7/22. Approximately 1/3 of those forms were received in the last 7 days. And more are expected. I spoke to 2 users today, which will account for another 20,000 acres, which expect to have their forms in tomorrow, but not today.
What percentage of our acreage does that cover then?
That covers approximately 20% of our acreage. With those additional users, that'll cover approximately 24%. And those are just the ones that I know of. I expect we will see a significant increase in forms coming in today and through the rest of the week. A lot of people have waited until the last minute to get their forms in. We've had an exponential increase in the number of calls and people asking, how do I fill this out, in the last week. So far, 4,034 acre feet of offered agricultural land apportionment has been declined. So we have 4,000 acre feet of water that have come back that people have said, well, I don't need this apportionment. This water is in place in the Ag Water Clearinghouse. Some common questions we've received relate to, 1, the interface between the conservation programs, fallowing programs, and the Equitable Distribution Plan. 2, the future Equitable Distribution Plan implementations and apportionment methodology, especially as it relates to the loss of history of water use by allowing tenant to transfer apportionment to other fields. 3, what happens if the forms are not turned in or if deadlines are missed? And 4, the operation of the Agriculture Water Clearinghouse. The third topic, Agriculture Water Clearinghouse. Approximately 13,000 acre-feet of water was a double apportion, an agricultural land apportionment, in addition to a specified apportionment such as fish farm, dairy, or municipal. The Ag Water Clearinghouse decided to make this water available through the clearinghouse and is included in the total water apportionment available to distribute by the clearinghouse. Notice of transfer forms for the Ag Water Clearinghouse are due by the 20th of each month. The Ag Water Clearinghouse will meet after the 20th and before the end of each month to act upon the notices of transfers. Offers and requests from the clearinghouse are filled in a straight line acre-foot per acre method as outlined in the EDP and adopted by the Ag Water Clearinghouse. Due to the low response rate of the apportionment acceptance forms before the June meeting, which was approximately, as of June 20th, we had approximately 5% of the forms turned in. The Ag Water Clearinghouse postponed the initial distribution of water from the clearinghouse from June 23rd to July 25th. The current Ag Water Clearinghouse balance to distribute is 17,181 acre-feet of water. The expected distribution from the Ag Water Clearinghouse on the 25th is 13,880 acre-feet, which will represent 36,400 acres requesting and 17 different farm units. All the requests received would be filled, and a balance of 3,300 acre-feet would remain in the Ag Water Clearinghouse. Are there any questions?
Any questions, board?
Other than the 13,000 that was turned back by that calculation that the board decided to, is there any other water that the IID has available?
Well, there has been 4,034 acre-feet of water that has been returned on the Ag Water apportionment forms where people decided they did not need all that water.
17,000.
Director Hanks, if I may, we as a landowner also have an obligation to fill out those forms, and we are part of the problem. We haven't finished that. Tommy Mills, of course, is going through that, and there's some of the lands that won't use any water. So we will be returning some water. Yes.
Are you saying you guys are having a hard time filling out the forms too?
We're having a hard time getting to it. Yes.
They're too complicated.
I'll be happy to help if you want to give me a call.
I couldn't resist that. I'm sorry.
I'd like to make a comment. I sit on that I don't know if I sit on the Water Conservation Committee, but I attend the meetings, and it's been a long process going through this and working through the bugs, and we're still trying to answer a lot of questions that are coming in. You've done a great job, Mr. Brock, going through the process and learning it quickly, so I commend you on your work. And then the rest of the staff actually stepping up. And not that we knew that you couldn't, but it's a lot of work, and I just thank everyone for doing their job, trying to get this thing rolled out and accommodating all the requests that are coming in. I think there's a lot more work to do as we get near the planting season, and people are going to start trying to figure out how much water they have and what they're going to do going forward. I'm happy to hear that everyone's requests that wanted extra water were filled, and that was the purpose of this program, was to move the water from low use ground to high use ground. I guess the next question is, and could we ask for a study or see how many accounts there are out there that don't use water, that haven't turned in forms, and at some point we have to be able to take that water and move it to ground that does use water? Has that been looked at? We are tracking the accounts and the forms that have not been turned in, so we do know which forms have not been turned in. There's a slight lag between when we get them entered into our tracking form. And as we get a little further on in the program, we will be examining those and looking for
for accounts and for fields that have not turned in their forms or do not appear to be using their water to try and contact them and make adjustments.
Okay, because that would create a whole nother pool of water in the exchange, which I think a lot of people are waiting for that water to come forward.
Yes, and correct.
Because you're only talking about 1,000 acres at 4 acre feet, really, if you're looking at your 4,000.
It actually represents a lot more acres that turn back part of their water.
Okay.
I think we have a comment from Mr. Strom.
Thank you, Ben. Ralph Strom, farmer in Hopeville. Just to give you an idea of how much work was involved in doing the apportionment paperwork for our farm, which is about 5,000 acres, my daughter, who has never really worked on the farm, did all of our apportionment paperwork in 9 hours. So it's not that big a job. I don't know why the other 76% of the farmers haven't done theirs yet. Thanks.
You want to let Jesse borrow her for 9 hours?
Yeah, that'd be great. Didn't even cost us that much. We're not paying her much, but
On a volunteer basis, of course.
yeah, volunteer basis. She found the website to be user friendly, and she never asked me a question. She just got into it and did it and filled it all in with the interactive website. So your IT department, I guess, is the one that set it up, and it was very user friendly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strom.
Hey, Ben, before you go, I saw your brother Bobby this morning, and I told him that at the Water Conservation Advisory Board Committee last week that you did a really good job and you seem to know your subject matter. And he said that's why we never get mistaken, because he knows what he's talking about.
Well, thank you.
Well, no, he said it. I didn't.
Thank you for passing that on.
But I did find it humorous.
You better hang on to that one in your pocket, huh?
Yeah, you might need to use it on him.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Brock.
Thank
Next is information item 14 is the Water Conservation Advisory Board meeting of July 11th, 2013 update presented today by Mr. Al Kalin.
Afternoon. Al Kalin, Westmoreland. The WCAB met on July 11th for their monthly meeting. Tina Shields provided an update on the Bureau of Reclamation, on how the Bureau of Reclamation computes our water usage. It's still not easy to comprehend in a lot of our minds. For example, last week the Bureau was reporting we were overuse in the 20,000 range. And yesterday they said we were 12,767 overuse, and today it's 15,566. The water's still flowing pretty much the same as it does every day, between 4,000 and 5,000 feet below Station 60. So to say that we're still confused is probably an understatement. Carlos Villon reported on True Point Portal water history accessibility. The water history for the fields is no longer available for past crops to the growers. It was stated that the information was deleted from the portal because it was slowing down the system. There was conversation and comments on whether True Point is the proper program for farmers to access their crop history by delivery gate, by crop, or by field. The way True Point figures water use is also totally confusing, and the IID staff appear to be unable to explain how it comes up with the amount of water used during irrigation. It computes it in 2 different days. It usually comes up with the right figure, but how it does that can't be explained, and that's very confusing to us. if there was some way we could get the information taken out of TruePoint and put into a system that we could access to get our crop history, it would sure make things a lot simpler. Vince Brook provided an update on the WCAB proposed fallowing program, which is planned to replace the existing fallowing program. Vince and the WCAB fallowing subcommittee had planned to meet later that week to continue working on the program. Darren Fillmore reported that the On-Farm Conservation Committee had met to determine whether or not the proposed concepts were reflected in the contracts. He felt they were and wanted WCAB's approval to move forward with the 2013 pilot program. A motion and second was made to move the on-farm conservation pilot program forward, and the motion failed. Sylvester Jones, who oversees the MWD water conservation program, reported on maintenance schedules for interceptor reservoirs. There's been some concern that the maintenance was being performed on pumps on the Wiley Reservoir at the peak of the vegetable season when it should be operating at full capacity. After conversation with the board, it was agreed that he would schedule maintenance between March and August unless an emergency came up. We also agreed that we needed to have a special meeting to continue discussions on the new farm unit fallowing program and on-farm conservation program. That meeting was held on July 16th. At that meeting, the on-farm conservation contracts were discussed further. As a result, Mr. Larry Gilbert moved to go forward with the on-farm conservation pilot project for this year. Concerning the contracts, the suggestion in the motion was to eliminate Exhibit G, which addressed supplemental agreement for early enrollment, and in Section 14, which dealt with conserving party IID midpoint meeting compliance with agreement, eliminate the wording, cease water deliveries to the gate. Mr. Larry Cox seconded the motion. The motion passed, and I've given the resolution to Ms. Rivera. Discussion then switched to the WCAB fallowing program proposal. Vince Brook updated the board, and after much discussion and not much progress, the late hour, and finally a lack of a quorum, the meeting was adjourned. The subject will be addressed at the next WCAB meeting on September 12th, since we don't meet in August. However, we may decide to have another special meeting. That's certainly something we can do.
Any questions for Mr. Kalin?
Al, what was the vote on the on-farm conservation? Was it a split vote?
Yes, I believe it was 3-2. I'm not really sure. I really can't say.
Oh, that's right.
It was a.
It was a one vote difference, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What was the main concern there, Al? Was it the length of the on-farm contract? Was it the numbers, the math, or?
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty large document. There's some pretty strong legal language in it, too. Over 30 pages. It's certainly written for IID's, on IID's side, instead of the balance equitably between fairness to the farmer and fairness to IID. I think it could probably be rewritten in less pages, but I don't know. We're kind of running up against the wall here. We need to get going.
If it's all the pages I counted, it was like 82 pages.
There's two different contracts, I think.
Yeah, there's a tenant version and a owner version. Two different versions.
Some of those farmers out there that have crops that are using various types of water technology to improve efficiencies, such as onions or dehydration onions, are those farmers out there, do you feel they're willing to sign up and participate with that lengthy contract, or would we need to revise the whole contract before that?
I don't know. They'd have to read it. I mean, Mr. Mr. Cox made the statement that the way it was written, he certainly wouldn't sign it.
He objected especially to a long paragraph at the end that was, I think, overly legalistic, and I think that we can.
You were at the meeting, Mr. Kelly?
Yes, I think we can accommodate that.
So someone on our staff captured those specific problems that were stated by the...
Mr. Fillmore was there.
Yes.
We can speak to that, I think, in the next item.
Sure.
Mr. Strom.
Ralph Strom, farmer in Hopeville. I was one of the dissenting votes at the WCAB meeting in regards to the on-farm conservation program as proposed. Actually, the contract doesn't bother me, and the program I like. The reason I voted no was because we don't have recorders on our gates. So it's hard to determine if we have good numbers for our baselines and for the conservation. When we're talking about getting paid $285 an acre foot for conserved water, I think it merits having good monitoring and recording of our deliveries. And just one or two ruler measurements is not the kind of accuracy we need for $285 conserved water. But overall, I do support the program, and I think Darren has done a very good job with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strom.
The vote was 5-3 for the motion to pass.
Any further questions for Mr. Kalin?
In regards to the on-farm fallowing, I know it came up as a separate item. There was some discussion of the timelines that were proposed, not on-farm, farm unit fallowing, sorry. The timelines that were proposed was a September solicitation, so that really wouldn't work if you guys are discussing it in mid-September, right?
No, and I, in all fairness, if we had moved that forward, one of the questions I asked is there a contract already made up to be used for, because it's an entirely new fallowing program.
Right.
And I don't know that anybody's even worked on a contract yet.
That was a question to staff also. Where do we stand on a contract for the new type of fallowing?
There was a draft contract way back, but I'm not sure that with all the changes that have been made, whether Joanna's even had a chance to look at it again.
So, Director Minson, you brought this up before. I think I think your question was how quickly are we able to act? I think I told the board that we essentially had the summer.
We have a month.
And so I would look for the existing fallowing contract to be adapted so we can expedite this.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Kalin?
I guess, Al, if we came up with a contract in August, could you guys call a special meeting to review it?
Certainly.
Okay.
I'm going to be here in August because my foreman's on vacation. So,
Thank you, Mr. Kalin. Next up, action item 13 is a 2013 On-Farm Efficiency Conservation Pilot Program, page 76 of your agenda, and presenting today is Mr. Darren Fillmore.
Here's managers. I'm Darren Fillmore from the Water Department. When I last addressed you in the end of June, I gave an informational update on the status of the program, the On-Farm Efficiency Conservation Program. And since then, as Mr. Kalin mentioned, there have been a number of meetings. The WCAB subcommittee convened first, then the WCAB regular meeting, and then their special meeting. So my hat's off to the WCAB members for volunteering a significant amount of time to help this move forward. Now, as Mr. Kalin mentioned, the WCAB reviewed the contracts in their special meeting, not on a page-by-page, painstaking process, but they did vote to move forward with this pilot program. Now, one thing I should note here is in all of these meetings, and even in our last board meeting when I spoke to you, there's always a desire to talk about certain concepts of the on-farm conservation program that would work better this way or that, which is why we did a pilot program, is to try out the proposed concepts that the subcommittee came up with last summer, and then to take a step back and see what needed to be changed. So that's what we're still talking about today, is this pilot program. So in addition to the informational update I provided last month, there are a few more items I can update you on. This is a proposal summary, a summary of the conservation measures received and how many acres for each conservation measure. Board members, I handed this out to you as a supplement during the break. Now, you'll notice that sprinklers is the preferred conservation method for the 26,000 acres of proposals we've received, but a good deal of tailwater reuse systems as well. Another way to look at the proposal information is by crop, and to some extent it mirrors the way our normal cropping occurs, alfalfa being the primary crop. Alfalfa is the primary crop in our proposals here. You'll notice there are a lot of applications on onion acreage. A lot of that was for sprinkler and drip irrigation. And then wheat, Bermuda, and on down the line to some of the smaller crops there. Also at the special meeting of the WCAB, I presented a summary of those seasons that have been completed already, that began either in the end of 2012 or in 2013 and have been harvested so far. And we're able to do the verification on those. And for those 911 acres of completed seasons, they're all wheat and onions. We estimate there's about 1,260 acre feet conserved. And that water, of course, is sitting in the river waiting for us to be able to claim it. And as we continue to go through baselines and establish baselines with growers, there are some more savings we can attribute to those seasons, I believe. The next steps I would recommend for the program, the pilot program again, is to continue soliciting. When we put out the solicitation, we put a deadline on it of December 5th, 2012. And of course, we've continued to accept applications through the present, and we will continue to. We may put out another solicitation to push for fall crops so that we can get the participation we'd need to meet that 16 to 20,000 acre foot goal. And in order to facilitate those fall crop seasons, I'd recommend that the program be extended through the end of next summer, through August of 2014. And again, I am talking about the pilot program. Now, in order to be ready for fall 2014 crops, we'd need to also have another program starting in the summer of next year. And if there are changes that need to be made, we can begin working on those changes now for the next program. And a final recommendation is that to the contracts that have been the subject of much debate, they need to be executed. I spoke with Ms. Smith yesterday about making those changes to the paragraph that Mr. Kelly noted that seemed a little heavy-handed, and there's certainly ways we can soften the language there. The WCAB on-farm subcommittee to decide what concepts should be embodied in that paragraph. But it essentially talks about the breach provisions. What should we do to an individual who is not complying with the contract? And as I've emphasized before, there is a difference in my mind between somebody who's underperforming because we set the wrong target for them, but they're trying hard, and somebody who simply is not doing anything, or they've changed plans, packed up, left down, whatever. That, in my mind, is a breach and would be subject to these provisions we're talking about. So I will call a meeting of that subcommittee and confer with the WCAB chairman to see if we can find a time when we can address that specific topic. And with that, Mr. President, I'll take any questions the board may have.
We have questions for Mr. Fillmore?
Darren, at the WCAB meeting, you presented a slide showing the different contracts that people had applied for and kind of the ranges. Some were quite large with huge baselines. and
Right.
some were quite low, and some didn't submit at all or fulfill their obligations. How did you, because you didn't have contracts signed, did you have anticipated savings in those contracts that you would have actually picked a number, or no?
Right, because we were talking about their seasons that have been completed, so we could take actual delivery reductions
Right.
and calculate what their savings should be. Makes it pretty easy to sign a contract compared to what we'll be doing in the future. We'll have to be estimating those savings. But you're right that several of those seasons did show significant savings because they had very high baselines. And the topic was discussed in that special meeting of the WCAB, should there be a cap on baselines or on conservation from these fields. And there are a lot of different ideas on how to handle that. A cap certainly would be effective in discouraging the kind of gaming that some folks anticipate could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Say if somebody had a high use field and they wanted to put a different kind of crop on it than they'd had before, and a crop that they otherwise would not have done. They'd do this because of the program to be able to cash a big check. Putting a cap on that would discourage that. Now, on the other hand, this program is one designed to conserve water where there's water to be conserved. So my concern with putting a cap on the conservation amount would be that those fields that legitimately have a high water use would not be encouraged or incentivized to enter the program if we capped it too low. Another recommendation that's come forth in the WCAB subcommittee meetings was to set a threshold above which any conservation would have to be approved by the technical review committee that's proposed as part of this program. So, for instance, if any proposal submitted were for more than 2 acre-feet per acre of savings, that proposal and that applicant would have to go before a committee of their peers and defend why their data is good and why their conservation measure can conserve above 2 acre-feet per acre if that were the threshold picked.
And what was the range of the savings? It was from 0 to what, 6 acre-feet?
Yeah, the highest one I think had a baseline of over 10 acre-feet per acre, and the use on that field I believe was around 4.5 acre-feet per acre.
So they showed a 6 acre-foot savings, right?
Correct.
Which is about, I can't do my math, but
And that one-
$1,800 an acre.
It's a lot of money for sure. Now,
Yeah.
that one being the extreme case, I've paid some attention to that and have been in contact with division staff to verify that delivery gate actually did get those deliveries and it wasn't somewhere else that the deliveries were taken. That appears to be legitimate history. And that field also has a history of having grown that crop.
Mm-hmm.
And that specific one was onions on some fairly steep and sandy ground, and I can believe that a 10 acre-foot per acre history would be legitimate for that field. Now, there's certainly some subjectivity to that, so that's where something like a threshold would come in handy, I believe, to give staff a tool to say, you're above the threshold, you've got to go to the technical review committee and make your case.
All right.
These are all topics that we can discuss further in the WCAB subcommittee.
No, it's got use for a baseline.
Further questions, Director?
Yeah. So on these pilot fields, you use a historical baseline, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Where history is available.
And do you think it's acceptable for someone to be paid $1,140 an acre foot? I mean, $1,140 an acre for conserving off of a 10 acre high use field?
I think it provides a very good incentive to reduce the water use on that field. Now, where it would be unacceptable is if that history is not accurate. Then I'd have a problem with cutting a check like that.
I think it raises other questions that you'd have to deal with more than just those two.
I think part of the question that needs to be asked is, are we incentivizing people to save water? And if so, how much do we want to incentivize them? I think when you start farming the system, it gets kind of out of control. I do think, though, that those are the types of fields we need to go after, and we need to incentivize them because they do conserve so much water. I mean, I know of instances of 12 acre foot fields I don't farm any because it's all very steep and gravelly, and it just takes a lot of water. Those are the ones we should be going after.
You'll recall on the definite plan several years back, they looked at a range of options to set up this program to provide the incentives. On one bookend was to pay for conservation measures, reimburse farmers for their actual costs in building a system. The other bookend was to pay solely for water. And then they had a hybrid program that was kind of a sliding scale between, where you do a little bit of both. After presenting, well, the recommendation of the definite plan was to use the hybrid program. After presenting that to the WCAB, the recommendation they got back was that's too complicated to have this hybrid thing where you're looking at two things at once. And the recommendation was, let's just pay for water. That was the other bookend there. So that's the program that's been developed since, is a pay-for-water program, and it does exactly what Director Benson noted. It incentivizes those high water use fields to get in the program. Now, certainly, as we've discussed, there can be some ways to try to discourage gaming by putting some caps or boundaries around them.
You're definitely, Darren, going to want some sort of oversight committee, just so it's, it doesn't end up being you as a star chamber.
Yeah, if you remember at the WCAB, I think it was Mr. Osterkamp that was concerned about onions in particular, that if you start paying people, for instance, that case, that there would be an issue with the people that contract for the onions that were saying, hey, wait a minute, you're being subsidized. Why should we be paying you for...
Right, you're going to start getting more people farming onions.
Right, and, well, if you can get contracts, and the contract's going to say, well, wait a minute, we're not going to pay you that much because you're getting subsidized anyway. So there are other issues that we have to be careful about, and I think that those caps or some kind of threshold, I think, is very important. But at the same time, like you say, well, how do we then make sure those guys participate? So it is something that we haven't worked out yet, but we definitely need to spend a lot of time on.
Through the fallowing program, we've learned that there certainly are unintended consequences of programs like that. So I would expect that through this pilot program, we kind of chase out some of those bugs.
Do we know how much it costs? I mean, I know how much it costs me to sprinkle up an onion field and keep it on sprinklers, but has the IID gone out and verified some of the costs of these measures so that, we might pay 50% above and beyond the cost of a measure just to incentivize them to put it in?
Yeah. As I mentioned in the definite plan, where they were talking about paying for measures, there was an extensive study done on cost because IID would be reimbursing costs directly. Since the movement to change to a pay-for-water program, not a lot more has been expended on trying to verify costs, more on providing the proper incentive on the water side.
Well, I for one think that we need to go after the heavy water users. I think paying over $1,000 or whatever the number is, or 10 times the cost of putting in a system is kind of unreasonable and not giving away money, but definitely over-incentivizing. So I would support, looking at a set of options that kind of specifies you do a distinct action and you get paid that plus an amount if it comes up with X amount of water. If it comes up with more to the benefit of all users because there's more in the pool to be used or more that they don't have to contribute through an allocation. But I think that it's important that we do come up with conservation. We keep moving forward, and we're not just continually bogging down the process. For this one pilot project, I don't know that we can change a lot other than set some caps and some parameters to just get it in the books and keep it moving forward. But we need to keep it moving forward.
I agree. There are a lot of these kind of concepts that we'll need to flesh out a lot further before we do the next version of this program.
How are you going to select those that move into the program? If you have an over subscription, how are you going to handle that?
So far, that hasn't been a problem, but the way the program description is written, the proposals are divided into bins based on their total conservation value in acre feet, and then within each bin, they're randomized. So the higher acre foot proposals are given first consideration.
Well, so if a guy has hard clay and he has 4 acre feet and
you're not going to save that on hard clay.
And he can save 30 to 40% of his water use, you're going to move it to somebody that can only save 10%.
But when we look at the total value of a contract from a volume standpoint, a longer term contract, for instance, a guy who can only save 0.1 acre feet per acre, but if he's willing to enter a 10-year contract would save a lot of water and be given higher priority. The thought behind that prioritization was more to make it worth it for staff to put forward the administrative effort to enter a contract and administer the contract. So there's a minimum of 20 acre feet. We don't even want to bother with a contract that's not going to get us 20 acre feet. Now, there may be some considerations to be made on how to prioritize these contracts that we'd look at in the next version of the program. In the pilot program, as I mentioned, it hasn't been a problem, and I don't foresee that it will. We need a lot of volume, and I don't think we're going to have an oversubscription.
So there's a cap on the existing fallowing program, right?
As far as payment, yes, six acre foot, yeah. So even if you conserve 10, you only get paid for 6 maximum, yeah.
So it makes sense for there to be one here.
Yeah,
as well.
I'm thinking in terms of a percentage. Would be the max if there was, if someone has a historical use of 10 and he's conserving 4, I mean, that should raise up, I wouldn't necessarily call it red flags, but I would think someone would really be questioning that.
But what if he had a 6 acre foot history and he saved 4?
That would be worse.
And I'd say you put in a 1 water barley.
A what?
A 1 water barley. You ever hear of a 1 water barley seed?
I think that would raise a red flag, yeah, so you would have to. But again, I think we can use the advisory committee to help us with all those kinds of things, all those kinds of issues that were brought up here. For instance, like you talked about if there is more applications that we have water to sell that year, then we need to look at the committee to help us make decisions.
Well, I imagine it'll probably boil down to the number of people that apply to participate. And I would think that the wider you spread that to accommodate those that signed up, I think it would be better in the long run. And if some of the others then conserved more, they could put it into the water bank and move it to the rest of the farm unit. But I think you need to be real careful that you're talking about revenues here. You're talking about down the road there'll probably be more requirements put on. So I'm thinking that you need to get that spread over as wide a number of participants as you can. And if you don't get the numbers, then go for it.
Speaking of participants, Mr. Hanks, you reminded me of something I'd like to point out in the presentation. You notice we received proposals for 26,000 acres, and then on this final, or maybe the previous slide, I presented an analysis of 911 acres. So there were a significant number of acres that proposed, but in response to IID not moving forward quickly enough on the contract, or maybe they were just looking for the baselines and weren't truly interested for whatever reason, did not implement the conservation.
You might have been a casualty of the apportionment on some of that.
Oh, also very likely.
The 911 was solid set versus, I know some was drip also, right?
Most of those are solid set, but certainly there are some drip irrigation.
And did anyone go forward with the center pivot?
No.
Because that's a huge expense up front. And the ditch lining, I'm just looking at some of these land leveling they do anyway.
Right. There are some ditch lining projects that have been put in. There are some center pivots out there, but they were existing, I believe.
And do you have an anticipated savings on sprinkling versus pump backs versus drip?
Well, we know what's reasonable, but as it's a history-based program, it really depends on what the baseline use was.
But a range?
Yeah, I would expect.
Could you provide us with a kind of a summary of ranges where you think
Sure. Yeah,
different programs would come up? Because I think that's what farmers are looking for too, is what are the ranges that are anticipated. If you have a high baseline, of course you're going to save more, but what is it?
The response I've given to farmers who have asked that question is, well, it really depends on your baseline.
I know, but you've gone through the analysis, so just randomize it and put it on a chart and say where people have fallen in the range.
We can provide that.
Okay. Because I'd like to see that tracked over time. Hopefully, we're getting all the people that use a lot of water, and at some point, you know, people are going to have to start complying with water conservation practices if there is a shortage and things like that. So it's important that we need to look at all the options.
Again, this is an information item, and so if there's any other questions we'd like to know about it, so that we can come back to you the next time and get all the information in front of you to make a decision so we can go forward.
I have a question for Lindsay. Has this been gone through at the Farm Bureau level as far as, have you taken a stance on the on-farm program? Are you dark in August, or are you guys open?
Lindsay Dale, Farm Bureau. We are dark in August. We have not, although we've discussed this program, we do not have a current position on it right now, although most of the members of the WCC and WCAB are also members of our Farm Bureau. So I think you have a good representation of what our ideas are there.
So it's a 3-5 vote pretty much across the board.
Lindsay, before you step away, just one more Farm Bureau question I have. This technical review committee that we've discussed as part of this program, we've requested that the Farm Bureau provide a member and an alternate, and the WCAB provide a member and an alternate. And I believe you've discussed that in your board meetings.
Yes. Yes, I've spoken with my president. That would be a position appointed by the president of Farm Bureau, Don Emanuele, and we are currently working on that, so we should have that for you soon. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Darren, one of the questions I had a couple other times on the contract, if there's a cutback on the river and say that you have to cut back 10%, you know, we cut everybody back 10%, how are you going to handle that in this contract?
The current contract doesn't address it. I think it needs to be addressed, and that's something we can come up with some guidelines for before we come back.
Okay.
Mr. Strom, did you have a comment?
Just a reminder, the only policy that we have was what we brought up at 2 meetings ago, I believe, is that we wanted to make sure that those on-farm conservation contracts are public documents. However, we have been, it's been confirmed at one of the last WCAB meetings that they are a public document, so we're fine with that.
Ralph Strom, farmer in Hopeville, member of the Water Conservation Advisory Board, and on last Tuesday's special Water Conservation Advisory Board meeting, it was pointed out how great the water need is going to be for payback and transfer in the coming years. And fallowing does have its impacts, and I do participate in fallowing. I have 3 fields in there this year, and some of the revenues are being applied towards buying sprinkler pipes so I can do more conservation. But the need for more water for transfer and payback and other obligations really highlights how much we need to move forward on-farm conservation. And I know that we can do some more tweaking and come up with some caps, or even look back towards a definite plan and get some more ideas that we might want to implement in on-farm conservation. But we don't want to stop our motion. We want to keep moving forward, and we want to have all the tools that we can to conserve water for the obligations that we have on the river. Thank you.
Let me, Strom, let me ask you a question. On the upfront costs, is there any provisions to give the growers assistance with upfront costs?
I don't think we've worked that out in the pilot program yet. You know, there had been kind of a mindset early on that some of the fallowing revenues that the farmers are getting when they leave land fallow in the IID program would be used towards on-farm conservation, you know, to make ourselves more efficient. and farmers are doing a lot of land leveling, and they're buying sprinkler pipe. I talked to a vendor yesterday, and he said, I need to book pipe now because he's getting so many requests.
Wow.
So I think that we are seeing farmers move forward on their own to conserve water. And Al Kalin pointed out that, and also Jesse Silva, that the overrun projection from the Bureau continues to shrink. So I'm sprinkling on alfalfa fields now to cut my water use, and also on some flooding. So the farmers are doing a lot now just on their own, but we would like to see this program move forward so that we can expand it.
When we look at the iBank provision, do you feel that a percentage of that should be set aside for maybe help up front on farm costs?
I do. You know, there's some long-term water conservation on-farm programs that we'd like to enter into, maybe pump backs or something like that. And it's easy to say, you know, we'd like to do a pump back, but when you add in the cost of bringing IID power to a location and all the other expenses, it adds up really fast, and the water yield may not be that great. Pump backs aren't historically getting that much water saved as some of the fields that were in this pilot program with drip or sprinklers, but it's a long-term process to use a pump back, and there's a learning curve and everything else, and it's a great expense to get it installed. So, and anything we could get up front probably would help more farmers make that decision towards more conservation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would echo what Mr. Strom said, that I'm seeing a lot of extraordinary conservation going on in the Imperial Valley right now on folks on the dimes. They're not in the program, or perhaps they are anticipating getting in the program. But it seems that there's a wave that we need to be able to get ahead of and capture it with this program, so that that extraordinary verifiable conservation doesn't go by us.
Yeah, I would encourage the staff to try to document some of these processes ongoing. In the event that we do have an underuse, there should be some type of credit available there to help with our paybacks.
You know, we have, as you know, at regular intervals early on, working on that apportionment, we've invited people to document on the front end on-farm conservation. And I think that, Darren, you've got some people that are going to avail themselves of that, right?
I had some people. We'll work on getting some more.
I've seen a number of alfalfa fields with alfalfa about knee-high with sprinkler heads sticking up. I saw a sedan field the other day, and you couldn't even see the sprinkler heads. I'm kind of curious how that's going to work out.
And they're going to pull it out.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to echo Director Hank's comments. These farmers are doing a significant amount of work themselves, buying more sprinkler pipe, laser leveling, cultural practices. But yeah, we're not documenting it. We're not getting credit for it. So how do we get credit for it for payback purposes? How do we get credit for the system conservation that we're currently experiencing by operating our own reservoirs in a different manner? Jesse Silva reported earlier that we are reducing our spills, and now we're stepping up even further and hiring additional sand heralds or water patrolmen to assist in sequential delivery of the water to enhance that and save more spills. But are we only creating more water for allocation purposes, and we're not getting any kind of credit?
No, I think what we've said to them, at least at the time of the meetings, was that they ought to chronicle that. They ought to make a record of that. They ought to submit it to Darren and
have him verify.
And have him verify it. So, and on spill reductions, I think that those forms that he's talking about are for the purpose of validating the spills.
But are we? Do we have forms to document our own system spill reductions, Jesse?
Yeah, we're keeping track of everything, and then also even water that's returned, like say in the afternoons, and if we can find a place for it, it's conserved because otherwise it would have been spilled, and so we're keeping track where it's going to and all those kind of things. So we are making a
Is it our
effort.
plan to include that, conserve water through our spills into our arsenal for water payback or water transfer purposes in 2014?
Well, we
for
certainly-
some type of a legal challenge, because it will be challenged, but we might as well get the ball rolling on it.
There'd be no other reason to staff up the way we are.
Thank you.
President Desert, I've submitted a draft payback plan to the Bureau that does incorporate that spill reduction measure.
How many acre feet are we getting credit
Up
for?
to 100,000 is what I put in there as a placeholder, so we could get as much as we could.
Any other questions for Mr. Fillmore?
I have a question. What staff do we have that are able to work with farmers and develop a format to apply? Because I think that's the next step. We have our on-farm program, but if they're not really applying for money to be received, it's just more for documentation of conservation. Maybe we should just go through that process.
Have people solicit farmer input, you mean, for projects?
Well, I think we should come up with a simple form. Just say, are you doing any conservation projects? If so, fill in the box on what you're doing so we can document it, what crops, what periods of time. Because a lot of it might just be a simple little process, but then at the end of the year we can add it all up. If we have an underrun, we should be able to come up with a number of projects that people have done.
Yeah, we'll work on that real quick because we need to get going real quick on that to account for it. We've heard a lot of things, and a lot of guys, I call guys, like I see like Jim, they're sprinkling alfalfa, so I called, it was Freddie Abadi. Well, what are you doing there? Well, he says, I don't want to tell you yet, I'm going to see if it works. So, a lot of guys...
Well, you've seen if it's going to work on about 2,000 acres, so if it's going to work, it's going to work.
Yeah, but we'll see what we can do there.
Mr. Silva, I might add that in recent WCAB meetings and others, I've put a few ideas out there on how this voluntary conservation might mesh with our conservation programs that we're putting together. And there are different ways to handle that, and I think it would merit some more discussion in the Water Conservation Committee and Water Conservation Advisory Board to get all these programs, all these conservation programs to come together and work together, right? Right now, I understand that WCC has been all consumed in apportionment, and that's bound to be how it will continue, but just the interaction of these programs deserves some attention.
Well, I'd like to comment, too, that the WCC was started to kind of spearhead apportionment, but I don't know how long that committee continues when you have the WCAB as an established committee that's been around, because they start working at opposite ends of the spectrum, or it's the same people putting on different hats, and I just don't know how far we're going to continue that. But.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Fillmore? Mr. Kalin, do you have a comment?
Yeah, as we look towards documenting conserved water, there's something that really we've known for some time in the TMDL project, when we first started that project. If you take the extra care to reduce the amount of silt leaving your field, that means you have to reduce the water velocity at the end of your field. If you do that, I've found that you conserve about 20% of your drain water, and that's significant. And that could be documented also as a cost saving, or a area where everybody has done a lot of work to reduce the silt leaving their field. And within the program's 10 years old now. Within 3 years, we had reduced the silt in the New River by 50%. And that's a tremendous reduction. 38% in the Alamo, which is a larger river. So that in turn reduced the phosphate levels in the Salton Sea because there was less silt going in there by 20 to 30%. It's never talked about. But in order to do that, to reach those high levels, which I don't think any TMDL has ever reached a goal that was set for them except ours, is that we reduced the amount of drain water going off the fields. We had to be able to put clear water in the drains. So something I just threw out there.
Mr. Kalin. Okay, anything else from Mr. Fillmore? Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Next up is information item 15, consider joining the Family Farm Alliance, page 163 of the agenda. And presenting today is Mr. Antonio Ortega.
Good afternoon, President Desert, members of the board. Antonio Ortega, Government Affairs. Before you today as an information item is some information regarding membership to the Family Farm Alliance. Some of you may already have awareness of this organization, as I've received some forwarded emails from some of the directors asking about some of their advocacy efforts. And given that IID was a member of this organization as recently as I believe 2002, if I'm not mistaken. But the Family Farm Alliance, just in a very brief summary, is an advocacy organization that was founded by a small group of California farmers about 20 years ago to help educate policymakers at the federal level, primarily Washington, D.C., about some of the issues facing agricultural interests, irrigation districts in the western states. Today, the Alliance represents members across 17 western states, and they are governed by a 10-member board of directors, most of whom are grassroots level type individuals, farmers, ranchers, members of irrigation districts, water users, etc. The Alliance has a number of programs that it uses to communicate its outreach message. One of them is the Farmer Lobbyist Program, where they bring folks back to Washington from their respective agencies, and they meet with their legislators, with the Department of Interior, Bureau of Rec, EPA, and others. The Congressional Outreach Program, annual meetings and conferences. They have an advisory committee that hosts monthly conference calls for all the members to participate in. And they have a monthly briefing newsletter also that they provide to their member agencies. So based on some of the issues that are important to the district, issues like the recent Colorado River Basin study, and just the myriad of issues here at the district and across the state, we are bringing this information back to the board and requesting or asking, or entertaining rather, the IID joining again as a member agency. There's a letter there provided in your backup directly from the executive director where he outlined some of the same points that I just mentioned. And again, I'm just here to answer any questions. This item will be brought back to the board at the next board meeting, and the contribution level that is recommended by staff is at the $5,000 level annually. And also, I'm sorry, briefly, before I forget, Gloria passed around a list of California member agencies. This list, as you will see, is passed around, is pretty lengthy, but this is only, again, the California water agencies. Their total membership, I'm assuming, is in the couple hundreds, just given what California alone is, but they do not have that information made publicly available. I would have to request it, and that may take a couple days to receive that. But they did provide me with this California member agencies list for you to view.
Will we be the only one being served by the Colorado River?
No, there's others, and I believe Yuma, I thought I saw on there, was one of the member agencies from the lower Colorado, as are many others, I'm sure.
But in California, we'd be the only one.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, in California, I believe we would be.
I have a comment. I was just going through this site, and it's one of the consultants for the Ferguson Group is very prominent in here. And I can't help but ask, well, where was he during minute 319? He just had it's in the newsletter that he had a meeting with the Department of Interior. And I may be wrong, but I don't recollect seeing any report from Mr. Limbaugh with regards to any of the work that he may or should be doing for us. And if we're paying the Ferguson group, I don't know how many of the other consultants are part of this, but we're also paying this group, and we're getting nothing from either one. $5,000 is a relatively insignificant amount, I think, in many ways. But I would urge us not to be so hasty in jumping into a membership of something that doesn't. I don't know what they're going to do for us. I know what we're doing for the Ferguson group because they're getting something for it, but they're not giving us anything back. So I would suggest that we look at this a little more deeply, and that perhaps August 6th is not necessarily something we may want to jump into right away. I personally would like to have more time to check on this.
Okay, well, it is an information item.
Yes.
But we used to belong to this thing before, didn't we?
Well, we may have. What did they do for us? What did they do for us in the last year? And if not, because we didn't belong to them, what did Mr. Limbaugh do for us as a result of him being so active with them?
Yeah, I believe that in a past life, Mr. Limbaugh actually was staff to this group.
He's prominent.
I'm not sure. I know he's
I
a
think
contract lobbyist.
Prior to his time at Reclamation, he worked for the Family Farm Alliance.
Yeah, I think he was the executive director. Isn't that right? Okay. Yeah, and I believe that there's some continuing relationship between Ferguson
and he left there and then went to Undersecretary at Interior.
Right. So I think the main draw, and you're right to question even a $5,000 commitment. We belong to many organizations, and it's a valid question as to how many of them are doing us much good. But in the context of the basin study that we're confronting on the Colorado River, the Family Farm Alliance would be a natural ally. And I think the main reason we're bringing it to you today is that, Antonio, didn't you tell me that West Lands is their biggest member?
Correct. From the California member agencies, they are.
Not a Colorado River contractor, but a bureau. But we'll scope that out better, Director Galindo.
Thank you. I want to be clear. I just think that that the Ferguson group is the one that's ending up with the better end of the deal here.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Next, we have information item 16, Energy Department General Matters, page 167. Mr. Stills.
Yes, Mr. President. Happy to say that our north-south line connecting Sea Solar, Tenaska, AES to the Drew substation has been built, turned over, and hooked up. And the east-west line cable across the canal has been taken down. Also, the rest of the line is on schedule to be taken down, even as much so that Mr. Avery has already sent an email to us saying he's already ordered his people to get out there as soon as possible and remove it. And the governor's office on our governor's call has made it a task to monitor the dismantling of that line. So I thought you might be happy to hear that. Next issue was the backfeed station service. We did put that out for comment. We got a number of comments back, some of them wanting a basis for the cost allocation. Our CFO's office has had the rates people looking at that. My understanding is that they're almost done with that, and we might have that ready for bringing back to this board for approval I think next week, and so maybe the following board meeting. We've also been looking at the affected system, contracts that are out there. We're setting up meetings to go to the ISO, and now that the affected system studies are done, we'll bring those studies back to this board so you can see where those have come in with the reduced scope. We're going to be setting up meetings to go to the ISO and work out those operational procedures so we can get the affected systems contracts in place for the developers that are out there. We've been working in our IRP. We've had an issue that has recently surfaced that a number of utilities are experiencing right now, and we wanted to get it into our IRP. It's the integration cost of intermittent renewables on the system. So we're looking at that pretty heavily. Just on our system right now, looking at Sun Peak on the 23 megawatts there, the swings on the system are 50% of that 20-some megawatts, which is substantial. That will drive our integration cost and how we handle that. We presently have a group of people that will be looking at battery storage as a way to mitigate that. That will be expensive to incorporate and integrate intermittent renewable on our system. So we are looking at that. We're going to try to get that done as fast as we can so we can get that IRP to this board and then start looking at what we procure. That integration may change our procurement strategy because reliability of the system will be tantamount as in moving forward. It also will change it because it will change the economic evaluation of just energy, low-cost energy versus best fit low-cost energy type situation. So we're going to be looking at that pretty extensively.
Carl, if I could, I just want to interject. The board earlier today, I think it was enclosed. I think maybe Director Benson might have alluded to it in open, but that story about SDG&E's exploration of a gas-fired plant on the Navy land to the north in response to the loss of San Onofre. Farther down, SDG&E complains about the high costs of integration with all the intermittents that it's having to shape.
The California ISO is now including an integration cost in their solicitations from the IOUs, so they're going to have to take that into consideration. They didn't take it in consideration before with the way they procured, because the CPUC made them take that as an evaluation point, but the ISO is driving that issue now. From my understanding, the integration cost of the ISO was at about $300 million per year, is now over $1 billion per year. It's a significant cost increase that will drive their tax rates considerably. Everybody's looking at that issue right now. IID is looking at it. We're not moving ahead until we figure out how we're going to move ahead, but we'll have that in the IRP and get it out to you. So we are doing that evaluation as quickly as possible. I will probably be supporting some type of battery storage project to be able to integrate the renewables on our system. I will be leaving tomorrow to go to San Francisco and participate in the Geothermal Energy Association's board strategic planning. We will be representing the Salton Sea Initiative in that planning process. So just to let you know that we are going to be participating. I did receive an email from Randy Howard today from LADWP. LADWP is there, wants to get together on this Salton Sea Initiative, so they're still interested. So just an information item for the board. And then I've asked the Energy Department to bring up, give you an update on the integration at the next board meeting and the San Juan update. And we want a regulatory update, which will include FERC Order 1000. You guys need to know really what's coming down the pike on that. There's some significant issues there, so we'll be bringing that to you very quickly. And that's it.
Carl, the latest APPA magazine, which Director Desert showed me, had a FERC Order 1000 update. Did you get a chance to read that?
I didn't see the magazine yet, but it does come to me. It's probably sitting on my desk.
Yeah, as was mine.
Carl, with the intermittent load of solar, do you have any idea what additional costs that might add
Well, I have a proposal for for storage that's $5 million a year for 20 megawatts. If you understand battery storage, it's 20 megawatts per hour, which means it can go to 40 megawatts per half hour, 80 megawatts per 15 minutes. So it's just a load draw off the battery. We're looking at the charge-discharge times and what the peak is that could handle. The one that we're looking at now can handle about 70 megawatts. We think that's $5 million a year. If we were looking at somewhere between 60 and 70 megawatts, that would be somewhere in the $30 to $38 per megawatt hour. That would be an adder to the intermittent renewable cost.
You just made solar obsolete.
Well, you've got to encompass that. It may go back and push us more to either solar thermal, something with some type of storage capability, or back to geothermal or some type of base load. We have to be careful with that we don't go long and take or pay contracts and then have a risk with having to market that out the backside.
What would that have the same effect on rooftop solar?
Yeah, it's all PV, and so rooftop solar would be calculated into that.
Battery storage is a subject that's being discussed by other agencies and other SCAPA members?
Yes.
Well, if you're looking at that type of cost, then geothermal gets very competitive.
Yes. And I think that might help us build the case. The study that the CFO's office has asked EES to do for the Salton Sea Initiative, my comment back to that is let's include that integrated cost when we look at that cost comparison.
I have a question for Carl, Mr. President. Carl, is it my imagination or have I been reading more in the newspaper that the copper thefts are going back up again?
I would imagine that copper thefts would go up again. It's just a matter of time. The more you scrutinize anything, and depending on the economic times, depending what people will do, if they can steal the copper, they're going to. There are things and programs that we put in place, notifications that we put in place to try to drive those down, but you can't make anything people-proof. Sooner or later, they'll get around the controls and figure out how to take the copper.
We haven't had any major thefts recently?
Nothing reported to me, to my knowledge. I think what you're reading may be in other parts of the country.
Okay.
The higher the meth and the higher the beer, the higher the thefts.
Yeah.
That's true.
I didn't know you was a rapper.
I'm telling you.
Hey, Carl, just an update. That conference I mentioned to you, October 20th to 23rd at San Diego, is the
transmission?
Electrical Energy Storage Applications and Technology Conference.
We'll probably be looking at that. We will be also sending a group to Alaska. They have a 40 megawatt storage in place, and we've got that scheduled for the first week of August. We have to see how that actually reacts on a system, and that's one of the biggest ones in installation right now. So we're going to be looking at that really closely. But battery storage is something we are definitely looking at. And the reason for that, if you think about it, and you'll see in this presentation the load swings, and they're pretty fast. But if I have a load swing that dips and comes back up, I'm counteracting that with AGC. Well, I've got a ramp rate on my gas turbines that are out there that the fastest ramp rate I have is 4.5, I believe it is, megs per minute. Solar electronics, the swings are instantaneous almost. So if I have an AGC that goes up and doesn't come down, and it takes minutes for it to come down, that's fuel costs that I'm expending in order to balance that system out. So those swings are very hard to capture. If I have a battery on there, that's a pretty fast charge and discharge time of that battery. I can keep up with that ramping and those load swings out there. So I'll be looking at that.
Okay. Did we have any issues with these last round of storms, or no?
We had some issues, but they were lines going out and coming right back up. It was nothing major.
So not like Arizona or Nevada?
No. Our system's pretty reliable right now.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Carl? Thank you, Carl. We'll move on to the next item, which is also going to be yours.
Let me just do it from here.
Right. If you'd like, review amendment number 3 to service agreement number 811696
Right.
with F&B Enterprise Incorporated, page 168 of the agenda.
I had brought in Mr. Barbera originally because of the regulatory issues, because of the interregional coordination that wasn't happening at the IID. I've had him working with Mr. Noe Gutierrez from regulatory to teach him and mentor him out there, and to help IID in a regional strategy for transmission, which is especially in lieu of all the regulatory changes. When we brought him in, if the board remembers correctly, we ran into some very serious operational and compliance issues that we needed to fix, and I redirected Mr. Barbera's time to help in that process over the last few months, and we have used up his service agreement. That didn't negate the need for us to have the regional transmission strategies in place. So I'm asking the board to extend that contract $150,000 out so I can extend him for 3 months and get that transmission strategy in place and complete the process of how we're going to move forward with transmission planning, especially in lieu of all the regulatory issues that are coming down.
Carl, like you said, the scope of work have changed over time as we're dealing with these other issues that have become critical. Do we have a scope of work in regards to a transmission planning group and what
Yes,
that group's going to look like?
We have a scope of work and deliverables on his contract. We're asking him to help us to deliver a strategy for moving forward with transmission, a white paper, so to speak, that will be a strategy, a strategic plan for IID.
And in particular, what I'd like to see, and I've asked about this a couple times, is it was revealed that we were actually generating for reliability purposes and doing so in an above board, beyond our requirements. And by doing this excess reliability generation, we were pushing back electricity flows on our eastern front from Arizona and on our western fronts, primarily at the IV sub coming in on our S line. And we were losing the availability of our self-generating power stations, or peaker plants, to be utilized on the trading floor. So there was some economic loss going on here, and we've been doing this for years. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some type of report here in the near future, feedback as to what we've learned there, what we're doing different, if we have an SOP in place, and specifically when we do get the SOP in place to keep us from doing that, what kind of dollars and cents we're saving, what kind of self-generation we're now capitalizing on and benefiting the agency.
Mr. Barbera was actually working in conjunction with our auditing department, looking at that from economic dispatch versus reliability issue, to look at the gaps in the system. They've identified a ton of things that are gaps that we're in the process of closing right now. I believe auditing has a report that's coming forward that's showing the gaps, also showing that we're also putting the solutions in place. They've had Jack Allen working on that, and I've got some emails from him on both sides of that coin now, that he's comfortable with the way we're going right now, but that report should be coming to you very soon.
Is he coming before the board also, Mr.
Well,
Allen?
he and Z Global and Frank Barbera will be here to talk about that. And so I'll have to talk with Betty on when that's scheduled, but that is hopefully being finalized right now as we speak. I got notification on it over the weekend that it's being wrapped up.
Carl, when did Mr. Barbera come on board, and then how long is this period of time that his contract's going to extend?
I'd have to go back and look at the start date on that. It's been kind of a blur, quite frankly, in the last 3 or 4 months.
It was in January.
I think it was,
Beginning of the year, more or
yeah,
less?
it's somewhere in that area there. And this $150,000 extension will extend him out 3 months. I'm not sure I'll use him past that 3 months. I'm hoping that strategy will be in place in that time frame.
I think it actually corresponded with the arrival of Mac at
Yeah.
the SOC.
I think
So that would have
he
been
preceded Mac just a little bit.
just by
right.
a little, yeah.
Okay. Does this contract cover living expenses or something, or is it just his time?
His all expenses are in this contract.
Okay, so it's all thrown together. It's not just his time; it's other costs,
It's
travel, everything.
Everything.
Okay. And he doesn't reside here, so he's traveling a lot.
He's traveling back and forth. He actually resides in New Mexico.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Carl, I'm a visual person. And I remember about 7 years ago, right after our prudence review, we had developed a strategic plan for our transmission. Do you anticipate a revival of that plan or a totally different one? Personally, I'd like to see some maps or.
Absolutely. I think the business case, I think there's 3 scenarios that are being worked on, and the business case is being worked on. I think when it's brought to you, it'll be in a presentation format. I believe that's one of the products we will get on that as a strategic direction, and it'll be in form of a presentation. I've also asked for a white paper to go along with that.
Will this strategic plan also address the FERC 1000 issue?
It has to address FERC Order 1000. That's the biggest concern we have out there right now. And it will also address the strategy of IID's geographical positioning, which is huge. Sitting between these 2 balancing authorities with West Connect on one side and Cal Energy on the other, the opportunities that we can realize with a hybrid system that we're looking at, how we can become kind of a hub with all the renewables here, that's really something we're trying to capture in this strategy and the strategy for putting that in place. So there's opportunity for IID working forward from a transmission standpoint.
Well, we've got to get wheeling some way.
Well, if we can become the hub, you'll recognize quite a bit. If we're working with the Cal ISO and we have a line like the Salton Sea line, the risk of subscription will go away because they pay you TRRs on top of that. For those agencies that are the off-takers that don't want to be on the Cal ISO system due to their high cost of wheeling, they would be on IID system. So it wouldn't matter to us. It would be innocuous to us. But our BA would be intact, and then we would just be looking at where the off-taker was, how we hooked them up and got them out of here.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Stills on this subject? Thank you, Carl. Move on to information item 18, review amendment number 3 to service agreement number 8700006 with Irby Construction Company, page 171 of the agenda.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, board members, general manager. I'm here today to go through an information item on the Irby contract. We've had Irby working for us for many years, and this last contract has been a 3-year contract. We're getting ready to go out for a new contract. We'll put it out on the street. We're still working on the details of that, but we hope to do so within the next couple of months. In the meantime, Irby has done some work for us for Sea Solar that was reimbursable. Sea Solar paid us over $1 million, $1.1 million, which we had Irby do the work because of expediency, trying to get it done as quick as we could because of the tight timeline on that schedule. And so we had them work out of our contract. And what we'd like to do is backfill that so that we could use Irby on a going forward basis for some more pole work and concentric neutral. And then we have a transmission project up in Coachella. And so this additional money that we're requesting is basically to refill our coffers, because the money that was reimbursed to us by Sea Solar just went back into the general fund. We didn't credit it back.
Tom, the work they did for us on the Sea Solar project, was that the north-south line?
Yes, going to Drew Sub.
And I see on here part of that, the backing for the for refilling that hole is $750,000 of pole replacements.
Those are the budgeted items that we typically have a contractor like Irby work on, either a pole replacement program, an open concentric, or specialized projects. For instance, the Avenue 52 grade separation up in Coachella is a 92 kV steel or concrete pole line that's going to have to be built over a bridge.
And these, the pole replacements that's budgeted, that's historically what we've been doing on pole replacements?
That's what we have budgeted for this year, yes. Now, our crews do some of that work, and we also have Irby do some of that work, depending on where the poles are located and what voltage level they're at.
Mr. Still, some of these projects, would they gain us some type of a credit for interest in above and beyond improvements to our BA if we wanted to go that direction?
No, I don't think these would do that. They would have to be specific to solving the type of problem we saw with the flows across our system in that N-1, N-2 outage situation. So they're very specific to mitigating those flows across the system. This is general work that we use, and in the process of doing this, as Tom and I have been talking about this, staff is already writing an RFP for selecting a
one or new
contract
providers
for one or more contractors. I'd really like to see Irby plus someone else in here, and to use that as a competition against each other on this type of thing moving forward. That RFP is in the process of being written right now. This recharging is just to get us a little further along till we can get that bidding out and get that in place. And the other thing we're talking about is whether we go back and recertify our people on transmission, high voltage transmission. What do we go to? 92 kV now, not up in the 230 range. We need to be looking at that, but we used to have equipment. We no longer have that equipment, but we're going to be evaluating whether we should be doing some of that work ourselves too. Try to do more internally and less externally.
That's a hot glove certification.
Well, it's how you handle transmission. And if we go to 500 kV, that's a whole new ball game. So we would have to certify our people up on the 500 kV also.
Have we ever had that type of expertise here in the IID? We've always gone outsource that out, haven't we?
Well, we used to do 230, if I remember.
We've done some insulator work on 230, but it's been many, many years ago.
Yeah.
What is the process we use to select contracts for Irby using as opposed to using in-house? Do we have predetermined areas they work on?
If the work is of a nature that's going to be requiring specialized equipment, we don't have a lot of high range lifts that'll go up to 80 foot or above.
Okay.
And so that type of work would be given naturally to Irby. In the case of, say, the pole replacement program, we typically send them out into more remote areas where our travel time would eat up our construction time, and they're a little more efficient in the way they set their people up to go to the job site. Underground cable, it depends on where it is and whether they're set up for it. If it's a difficult job in a rear lot line situation, we a lot of times give that work to Irby.
So we give them the tougher assignments?
Yeah, typically.
Okay. Do they charge us correspondingly for that?
Well, they come up with a cost estimate, and then we run it past our construction people for verification, see if we can do it cheaper. But the advantage of having two contractors work on that similar type of a process really would enhance it quite a bit.
It seems like in $19 million a year, you should be bidding it to two or three people.
Well, this is 19 over 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, this was a 3-year contract.
6 or 7 million. Yeah. I support bringing in 2 or 3 firms and then having a bid process where they're competitively going after the work.
We also have recently, in at least the last 2 years, we've gone out for a lot of more hard money bids.
Okay.
Years ago, we used to do more of the work through IRB, and we've scaled that back, and now we go out when we can and when it's effective. If you have a real small project, you don't normally get very good bids because the bigger contractors are in the metropolitan areas like Phoenix or San Diego or LA, and they don't want to drive out here and work in the desert for a 5-pole extension.
So what percent of the work does our crews do in-house as opposed to outsourcing?
A good question. I don't know if I can give you an answer on that.
Okay.
We can look it up, though.
I was just curious.
Well, we'll look that up and get back to you on that.
If we take a look at our annual construction budget, I guess the $6 million that we've got on an average basis for IRB, the rest would be ours.
There's been more, fair to say there's been more in recent years for internal forces.
Right.
Well, our general concept, and the one that we're starting to promote, is to use internal forces first. To the extent that I can keep my people busy, I'm not double paying for it. If I'm parking my guys and using contractors, I'm double paying for it.
Right.
anyhow.
No, that was what I don't want to add more to their bucket, so our guys sit around.
That's absolutely the philosophy that we're pushing right now. We
Okay.
want to use them as a supplement to our workforce, not a replacement for our workforce.
I think people need to remain cognizant of the fact also, though, if you get 3 or 4 in here, I mean, it sounds good, but if you don't have enough work to keep one of them busy, then they'll leave, and you're going to have a hell of a time getting somebody come in here. So, I mean, there's a trade-off here. You got to have enough for them to be here, and you can't. If you take 3 and cut their work in by 2/3, none of them are going to stay here. Just fuel for thought.
Okay.
Dr. Hanks?
Yeah. I remember last year, there was a pretty good drawdown on IRB because of the storms.
Because of what?
Because of the storms. And there was a request to us to add similar to this to their budget, and we never did. We said, look, well, we have a contract for 18 million, you know. So my question is this: how much money is left in their contract?
Slightly over $1 million at this point.
Okay.
And that we're spending about $500,000 a month, so we got enough through the end of August.
Through the end of August. And do you recall how much we were short moving into this year? You know, because I'm sure you didn't have the $6 million.
No, we had $4.9 million at the beginning of the year.
So that it was $1.1 million. I think we were told we were short 400,000 and it was 1.1 million. Okay. So what you're proposing then is, will this 1.1 million that you're talking about, will that get them to the end of the year?
No. Well, we're actually talking about is enough to get us probably to October. And what we may have to do if we don't have our bid ready on the street, we have another project coming up called Dogwood Road in I-8, which is fully reimbursable by Caltrans. And that's going to be a $2 million project. We might start that project. But again, kind of depends on how we can get this bid out on the street and get our responses back.
I'm hoping we'll have that bid ready to go, so.
Park our trucks so
Right.
we don't pay double.
Yeah.
Okay, and I bring back to what Director Kuhn said. And I've heard since I've been on the board, if the IRB contract gets to a certain size, you know, they'll just have to pack up and leave, send their equipment elsewhere. If that happens, are there other companies in the vicinity that we could get the work done, say on an emergency basis, that we use IRB for?
There are other contractors that work out of either San Diego, Riverside, or LA.
Yeah, but would they be available?
Well,
Like in storms and stuff, you know,
I can't tell you about the storm stuff. Carl, you might know more about that, but
we
I know
have-
they've been bidding on our jobs.
We have other contractors that want to move in the area right now. They want to have a presence down here. They just don't have a contract.
all for competitive contracts. I just don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. Not everybody wants to
And don't let
relocate.
Don't let anything I said tell you that it has to be Irby, but there's got to be enough work for someone to.
Well,
to be
no,
here.
I agree with what you're saying.
I mean,
That's why
it
I'm
just
saying.
seems like with all the work going on with renewables and the solar work, there's a lot of people working down here, and you have a lot of qualified people around. So.
Do they hire locally or do they bring their own people?
Majority of the crews are at Irby are local.
But they do rotate around.
Yes.
One last question. Of the 1.1 million work that was done by Irby on Sea Solar, how much of that was overhead that should be coming back to offset some of our costs?
I can't answer that, Carl.
We'd have to look at the project report and see the breakdown.
Yeah,
of
it
that.
really bothers me. Much work as we've done out there, and we're not getting the wheeling. You know, there's the effective system, so forth. You know, there's some benefits here, but you know, we put in a lot of man hours to accommodate them, and I'm not sure that we're getting any reimbursement for that.
Yeah, we're actually looking at that issue seriously. We were reacting a lot to the situation. I've actually got Jamie Asbury looking at that issue. How do we get that money up front or have them pay some type of fee for that? But you're exactly right. That is an issue, and it's a gap we need to close, and we need to close it before any next round of renewables comes along.
What if we move that money, and if they do get to the other project, that might get you to the end of the year, and then we see where the bids are. I'd like to ask the CFO if he's comfortable with all this. They're coming into your budget, Greg.
Yes, I'm comfortable with their plan.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'd say bring it back next go around.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else for Tom? Thank you, Tom. And information item 19, one-year extension of letter of credit with Union Bank, page 175 of the agenda. Mr. Broking presenting.
Good afternoon. We currently have a $100 million letter of credit with Union Bank that expires in August 2nd of this year. We would like to extend that for 1 year under the same terms and conditions that are currently in place. What we plan on doing over the next year is negotiating a new letter of credit with them to arrange it so that we can protect the water delivery system if and when we borrow money for the water system conservation projects. Right now, our current letter of credit does not make that distinction between the water delivery system and the water transfer program. And so going forward, as I said, in an effort to protect the water delivery system, there's going to be a lot of effort and legal help to get it such that we can issue commercial paper just for the transfer.
And the financial impact for us on an annual basis to have the availability for this $100 million line of credit is $800,000 to $1.1 million a year?
Yes, that's the fee, and it depends upon whether we utilize the commercial paper or don't. So the low end is if there's no commercial paper issued, the high end if there is commercial paper issued. And I should point out that in addition to providing liquidity and a means to finance projects, we use the commercial paper program for the 3 issues at El Centro Unit 3. And I think I've mentioned the board in the past that we issue two types of bonds. One is certificates of participation, and the other one is revenue bonds. And if you issue commercial paper first and take it out, you're able to issue revenue bonds. And revenue bonds are preferred by investors over certificates of deposit, anywhere from a savings of 20 to 25 basis points. So using 25 basis points as the example, we issued about $230 million for the El Centro Unit 3 projects. And so the interest savings over the life of those bonds is going to be about $11 million. So, so far we think it certainly paid for itself.
Okay, so if we didn't have the $100 million availability, what is our bonding or our borrowing ability? Is it strictly based off of our credit cards?
Well, our borrowing, if we didn't have this, for us to borrow, we would have to go through the process of having an official statement and issue long-term bonds.
Yeah.
So
the line of credit is instantaneous. If you want to go get a loan, you can still get the loan, but it's going to take. There's a time factor involved.
Yeah, the flexibility and is as Director Kuhn says, is instantaneous. Basically, it's 1 day notice, and we can get funds.
But the time you roll it into a bond.
But the past discussion, so when I came on the board, we were at the $100 million, or we passed and set this up account that we had the availability of a $100 million line of a credit, or has that been available to the IID for some time now, longer than I've been on the board?
Well, since I've been here, the commercial paper program is $200 million, but I've never had a line of credit above $100 million.
Yeah,
so you're not able to issue more than $100 million.
But we just recently elevated that ceiling up to $200 million a little over a year ago.
Was it about a year ago?
With the old board.
Remember that?
Yeah. I don't think you voted.
75 to...
So no, it's part of the $100 million commercial paper.
Oh, that was commercial paper.
Yeah. Yes.
So we had the existing $100 million commercial paper availability, which is what we have here.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
We had the $100 million of availability of commercial paper 3 years ago.
Well, we had $200 million authorized by the board, but
about a year and a half ago that happened.
Yeah, you can't issue commercial paper unless you have a letter of credit, and we've only had a $100 million letter of credit, so you could not issue more than $100 million of commercial paper.
So we had existed for quite some time with the $100 million level cap, and then a year and a half to 2 years ago, the board increased that ceiling to $200 million.
I don't know when they increased the amount for the commercial paper.
I think there are two different things here, Matt. There's a line of credit is a standalone line of credit.
Is it a line or a letter?
That's a letter of credit.
Different. It's a guarantee. It's not an actual amount of money.
Oh, a letter of credit? Yeah. A letter of credit is a guarantee. A line is just you have the amount that you can borrow up against.
I'll come by and visit with you in front to get more detail on my questions.
Sure.
And Director Kuhn, my questions are around an interesting discussion on that agenda item and the way it was presented and the interesting vote outcome that came on that. So it was
and the old vote on the old board?
With the old board.
Okay.
Greg, I think I got a question. But it kind of brings up a necessary topic, but it's just a long-term financial strategy of the IID. And, we talk about our rates and where we stand. We talk about borrowing. We talk about ways we can borrow. We're in a raising an economy that's supposedly getting better, but also interest rates are going up. Mm-hmm. And I think us as a board need to look long-term, what's in the best interest of our ratepayers? How do we go after money? And they're talking about short-term rates going up faster than long-term rates. I'd like to have a board discussion on this and kind of set up a financial strategy for the IID long-term, because, boards change. Everybody could be new in 10 years. We don't know. But I think we need to kind of outline for the district as a whole what our opportunities are as a district, and then for budgeting, it kind of helps us make sense of where we need to spend money. And especially with the transmission strategy that we're talking about, there's going to be some significant, needs down the road. And I would like to set that up, that we just talk about it, what our options are, how do we define rates, and kind of lay it all on the line for not only the public, but as the board, because I get a request for a letter of credit. It doesn't give me a whole lot of information other than you won $100 million, which kind of scares me.
But we could take it to 200.
We currently have that 100 million, so it's just extending those terms.
But I would like to see it go out to bid also, and that's another thing that, I don't like to see it the last day before it expires. Like forklifts, everything else, we need to see it months ahead of time go out to bid, unless they're the best bank in the world. I don't bank at Union Bank, but
Letter of credits have been a sore subject with me for 3 years, because I've been trying to get banks interested in providing us with a letter of credit, or trying to get some competition, and they're not interested on a standalone letter of credit. They're only interested if they can, one, have banking services from us. So we currently have Union Bank as our banker, so that's really not an option.
Okay.
And the other one is if we give them investment banking services, then they would be interested in giving us a letter of credit. And I refuse.
Does that mean we put reserves with them, or that we do something else?
No, that we choose them as our bankers for bond issuances.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm not interested in tying the two together. So the reason why it's coming to you at the last minute, we've been working with Union Bank for 4 months, because obviously we knew this was coming, and it always, unfortunately, takes longer to put together than we think it should, and so that's why you're getting it, right before the due date.
And assuming it's going to expire, are they okay just renewing it after the next board meeting?
They have already authorized the renewal, so if there's no objection from the board, I'm able to extend that agreement by my signature.
Okay. But this is an information item, right?
It is.
Okay.
It is, but unless there's an objection, I wouldn't be bringing it back for action.
Okay, any other questions for Greg?
Yeah, I have a problem that it's an information item and we don't get to vote on it.
What do you mean we don't get to vote on it?
He brings it back for.
Well, are you going to bring it back, or you're not going to bring it back?
I was.
Yeah, he's gonna bring it back.
Well, he is now, huh?
That's my question. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooken.
Oh, wait, Greg, one quick thing. It appears that the fee they charge is about 1%.
That's correct.
And what is it for other types of lines of credit and things like that?
Every entity will pay a different rate based on their rating. So this is basically the best we can negotiate with Union Bank. So it's certainly in the range of what's out there. It's probably a little on the high side.
Well, he does.
But it's certainly not unreasonable.
So they do our banking services. They also, do they issue the short-term paper?
No, we use Citi as our issuance of the short-term.
Now, does Citi offer letters of credit?
They do, and I had discussions with them, I guess it was last year, and they were willing to offer us a letter of credit with no strings attached, but it was right at the time they were getting downgraded, and so they were getting downgraded to a level where it would limit the amount of institutions that could purchase our commercial paper.
I see.
So we didn't view that as a good thing, and we didn't.
So you
really
need
know.
a strong bank also.
Well, they were stronger at this point, I believe. I don't know whether Citi's been upgraded again or not, but at the time, it wouldn't have made sense to go with Citi.
Now, who's in the realm of banks that we can go to? Is it all the local guys, or it's everyone on Wall Street, or?
It's pretty much on Wall Street.
So B of A, Wells, Union, Citi,
and the really money center banks.
Too big to fail.
How about Rabo? Are they in the realm or no?
I've had lengthy discussions with them. They're only interested in issuing a letter of credit for the water department. And so we need one for water and energy.
Okay.
That might be another bank that I've been dealing with, but their fee has been, let's see, no, that's a different bank I've been talking to. Rabo did not want to issue a letter of credit. They wanted to do a different instrument, and I haven't really had conversations with them in the last year or so.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, lucky Marty.
One to go.
Okay, last item for the day, last information item, and last item is information item 20, second quarter surplus salvage report, page 176 of the agenda. And presenting today is Mr. Marty Holbrook.
Good afternoon, President Desert, directors. Per policy 1525, I'd like to present the disposal revenue report for the second quarter of 2013. The total revenues was $632,572.88. If you look on the report, you'll see that about 80% of that was the sale of that number 6 residual fuel oil from the Yucca plant, $520,960. And the balance was from salvage metals, transformer oil, the used transformers, and other miscellaneous salvage that was sold by our stores department.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Holbrook?
When are those 45 trucks going to go up for sale? I've had a lot of requests.
I think it's August 19th, the auction. Shooting for around the end of
And is that done locally, or do they go to a big auction yard somewhere?
it, isn't it? Locally, yeah.
Okay.
And we had some water trucks that were going to be going to auction also. Are those going at the same night? No? They haven't gone yet, though, have they?
And what do you do with your wood spools?
I found out that actually our biggest customer is the city of Imperial. They've been buying a lot of them. They use them for the farmers markets.
Oh, okay,
to
cool.
put
I was going to say Brawley's doing a farmer's market too, and they might need some.
Well, they should call Steve Benias, the superintendent. I hear they're $3 a spool.
Okay.
So.
And go like them too
Cheap
for
table.
4-H. All right.
I better have a farmer's market and give me a couple.
Questions for Marty? Thank you, Marty.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the time, it's 5 till 5, and we'll close the IID board meeting at this time.